Every season in the NFL, there are new playoff teams. And when there are new playoff teams, there are also teams that make it one year and aren't able to make it back the next. These are the 5 teams that made the playoffs in 2018 that I don't believe will make the NFL playoffs in 2019. Before I give you the 5 teams that made the playoffs in 2018 that won't make it in 2019, Gronk, spike the like button and subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. And comment below your opinion. Which team on this list do you think is going to make the playoffs? Which team that I left off of this list that made the playoffs last year you don't think is going to make it back next season? Let's start off at number 5 with the New Orleans Saints, a team that I am the least positive in terms of I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Like, I still think there's a decent chance the Saints do make the playoffs. And that's because their roster turnover wasn't as big as some of these other teams. But there are reasons that I do believe the New Orleans Saints will decline this upcoming season in 2019. Starting with, I don't think their offense is going to be as explosive in 2019 as it was in 2018, 2017, and in the past. And I think that all starts with Drew Brees. I think we did see some signs of regression in Drew Brees in 2018, specifically after that Dallas Cowboys game where he really couldn't push the ball down the field. He wasn't scaring defenses and secondaries with his deep ball. Everybody was sort of playing the underneath stuff and really stopping the New Orleans Saints offense just in general. And I think the emphasis is more on Alvin Kamara than it is on Drew Brees at this point in his career. And overall, I just don't see a lot of weapons on this offense that are scary in any way, shape, or form. And yes, they still have Sean Payton, and they did add Jared Cook, but outside of Michael Thomas, I don't see a wide receiver that scares the secondary. I don't see a burner type of wide receiver that stretches the field. And I think that regression with Drew Brees is going to trickle down on the rest of the offense and totally impact the rest of the team in general. When you don't have as high octane, as highly potent offense as you've had in the past couple of seasons, it's going to hurt your defense. It's going to hurt the way you play on both sides of the football, and I think that's what we're going to see in 2019 from the New Orleans Saints as a football team. They have lost 2 games 2 years in a row that I think emotionally are going to hurt this football team. The first one is the Minneapolis Miracle with the Stephon Diggs basically Hail Mary catch from Case Keenum that sent New Orleans packing in the 2018 playoffs, where they really should have won that game. And then in 2019, they lost a heartbreaker due to that no-call pass interference against the LA Rams at home in the NFC Championship. So those 2 losses combined, sometimes those just impact you. And just like Atlanta in 2018, where I predicted they wouldn't make it back to the playoffs, I kind of see the same thing emotionally happening to New Orleans, where it's just going to be their time where they take a step back and they do regress one season. Maybe they're back in the playoffs in 2020, but I just see them taking that step back in 2019. Not to mention some of the veteran losses that they did lose, including a key piece in Alex Okafor on the defensive line, Max Unger at center on the offensive line, and Kurt Coleman in the secondary. So those players, I think, along with all these other reasons, are why I have the New Orleans Saints missing the playoffs in 2019. At number 4, the LA Rams. Yes, I have the 2 teams that made the NFC Championship in the 2018 season not making the playoffs in 2019. While the debate for the Saints was a little bit more emotional, I think the debate for the Rams is a little bit more logical. Let's just start off with the loss of players that they have sustained over the course of the offseason. Whether that's LaMarcus Joyner at safety, and I understand that they added Eric Weddle, but LaMarcus Joyner could do some things that Eric Weddle can't do, specifically matching up in man-to-man coverage, which Wade Phillips loves to do. They lost Roger Saffold, which is overlooked by a lot of people, but he's one of the better guards in football. He left to Tennessee. He leaves a big hole on the offensive line there in LA. Ndamukong Suh is no longer there, and he had an epic performance in the Super Bowl and in the playoffs overall, just dominating, and really was a dominant force for them over the course of those big games later in the season in January and in February. Same can be said on the offensive side of the ball with CJ Anderson. When they needed a running back to come in and replace Todd Gurley, CJ Anderson was more than capable. He is now gone. Sullivan, their starting center for the past 2 seasons and more, is gone as well. So that center and that guard, both gone from the lineup. You look at the offensive line, and I kind of touched on it with Roger Saffold and with John Sullivan both being gone from this football team, but that's a major weakness. And Sean McVay's offense, no offense in general in the NFL, can sustain success without a strong offensive line. I really have huge question marks about the interior offensive line of the LA Rams in 2019. I also have huge question marks about Todd Gurley and his health. Without Todd Gurley, this offense, this team isn't the same. We saw them with a banged up Todd Gurley in the Super Bowl, and it just didn't go well. So Todd Gurley is the engine that makes this offense run. It's not Jared Goff, it is Todd Gurley. And without Todd Gurley, I don't know if this offense and this team is the same. Defensively for the LA Rams, there are 2 weaknesses that I see that could really hurt them in 2019. The first being that they are old. They're old at every level. They have an old player at every level of their defense. Looking at the linebacking core, they signed Clay Matthews. The secondary, they have Aqib Talib at their starting, most important, number 1 shutdown corner, Eric Weddle at safety. So they have a lot of old players that they're counting on, and to go along with that, old players plus a lack of depth is not a good combination. If those old players that tend to get injured a little bit more often do go down, they don't really have the players to step up and replace them. And not to mention, the Rams are a team that just lost the Super Bowl. And teams that lose the Super Bowl one season typically do decline the season after. At number 3, I have the Seattle Seahawks. And yes, the Seahawks are a team with Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, and I'll always give them the respect for that, and they do deserve that. And they've also been a very consistent winning football team, making the playoffs numerous times. I believe they've only missed it once with this combination at quarterback and head coach. But this season, I see a little bit of a difference in the Seahawks and the NFC West in general. Let's start with the NFC West. The 49ers are a significantly more talented team than they have been in the past. And if Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy, this team, I do believe, is better than the Seahawks. Then you go to the Cardinals, which I don't think the Cardinals are going to be a playoff team by any means, but they are more talented and more promising than they were last season, which just makes the division more talented and tougher to contend with, along with the fact that the Rams are still going to be a good team, even if I think they're going to miss the playoffs. And then you look at the offense. A lot's on Russell Wilson's shoulders. They have Carson, they have Tyler Lockett, but outside of that, what do they really have? DK Metcalf is going to be replacing Doug Baldwin essentially as their number 2 receiver, and I don't see that going that well, honestly. They're totally different type of players. And losing a guy like Doug Baldwin, that is the go-to receiver, go-to target for Russell Wilson. That's going to be a big loss. Defensively, they lost Frank Clark, their best pass rusher, and they don't really have much of a pass rush going into 2019, which is going to hurt their secondary, which performed okay in 2018. They have some promising young players there, but Justin Coleman, who is a really good slot corner for them, is gone to Detroit as well. 2 key losses on their defense, not to mention a couple of depth losses as well with Mike Davis, Sweezy on the offensive line, Shamar Stephen on the defensive line. So these are key depth players and key big time players in Baldwin and Clark and Coleman that are all gone from their team that are not back in 2019. The Seahawks are a very young football team, and they need time to grow together. They need time to gain chemistry. And they really need time to grow into a good football team. And maybe that's going to take this season. I wouldn't look at this, if I'm a Seahawks fan, as a pure negative, because I do see the Seahawks going in a positive direction. I just think in 2019, they're too young to compete in a overall stronger NFC West than it was a year ago. At number 2, the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, the problem with me is that they have not fixed what has ailed them for the past couple of seasons. Their offensive line is still horrible and one of the worst in football. And yes, they added some draft picks to the mix, but not enough for me to say, hey, this offensive line's way better. They're going to protect Deshaun Watson. And with Deshaun Watson getting hit as much as he does, I would not be shocked if he did get injured. I mean, I don't hope that happens, but it's very likely if you continue to protect the guy the way you have in the past. DeAndre Hopkins, there's too much pressure on him to perform, being that Will Fuller is always injured. Kiki Kote is a question mark going into the season. I think he's talented, but he's a question mark. You lost Demaryius Thomas there to add that kind of stable depth receiver. Ryan Griffin is also gone. So some of the depth kind of options in the receiving core are also gone. Defensively, you lost Tyrann Mathieu, your best player in the secondary, and then you lost your second best player in the secondary in Kareem Jackson, who's a do-it-all type of player. And those two players, their versatility cannot be matched with anybody that they have in their secondary right now. Not to mention, they also lost Kevin Johnson. So 3 players from their secondary are gone, and their secondary was already pretty bad. Along with that offensive line, those are 2 weaknesses that they've had for seasons that have only gotten arguably worse. This is the best division in the AFC, I believe the AFC South. The Jaguars added a way better quarterback. You have the Tennessee Titans, who are a pretty talented team, and the Indianapolis Colts, who made the playoffs last year, beat you in the playoffs last year, and pretty much only got better. So just looking at it, I think the Texans are in trouble in 2019. I would not be shocked if they did make the playoffs on the back of Deshaun Watson, but at the same time, I would not be shocked if they finished last in their own division. At number 1, the Baltimore Ravens. Now, there are a lot of things that point to Baltimore taking a step back this season in 2019. And the first and the biggest is Lamar Jackson. I just don't know what we're going to get in Lamar Jackson in 2019. He was solid. He won them a lot of games, but I will stress this point for you Ravens fans out there. He was not the key reason the Ravens won those games. It was their defense. And when I take a look at this defense going into 2019, I see a team that's depleted from the one that it was last season. You look at all the significant losses that they sustained over the course of this offseason. CJ Mosley, arguably their team's leader and definitely their defense's leader. He is gone. He's one of the best inside linebackers in the game, and you cannot overstate his impact and his loss. Zadarius Smith was arguably your top pass rusher. Terrell Suggs was arguably your second or third best pass rusher. They're both gone. And Urban as well was a very underrated interior force for your defense. All of those players are gone on your defense. So a number 1 defense, a top defense that Baltimore was last season, had to play at such a level for them to make it to the playoffs last year. And I think even if they slip just a little bit, the way that their offense performed last year and the way that I predicted to perform in 2019, it needs to be that great for them to make it back there, and I just don't see that happening again, with Lamar Jackson being an inconsistent passer, reports out of camp not being overly positive, and I understand you added some weapons to the offensive side of the football, but I just don't see that being enough for the Ravens to overcome a good division in the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the better Cleveland Browns. But those are the 5 teams that I believe made the playoffs in 2018 that I think are most likely to miss the playoffs in 2019. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. It's Mitch the Bottom Line View. Thanks for watching. Peace out.